Episode 27. Welcome back, everyone, to Not Another PD. So, this conversation is one that I'm really excited to bring you all, and we'll be looking at how helping professionals can make realistic, compassionate, and also sustainable nutrition changes without perfectionism, shame, or any restrictions. I'm joined by Angel Fan. Angel is the founder and accredited practicing dietitian behind Weight Your Options, a Melbourne based nutrition practice focused on helping people build realistic and compassionate habits around food and health. She believes nutrition should be guided by evidence, tailored to individual lifestyles, and free from perfectionism or shame, so clients can make sustainable changes that fit their real life seasons. Angel's approach draws on her experience supporting people to navigate challenging food beliefs, family of origin influences, and the overwhelm of conflicting nutrition messages. Her work centers on empowering her clients with practical tools and gentle accountability, helping them feel more confident about food choices without those rigid rules or perfect eating. Welcome, Angel. Thank you so much for joining us. Just to start us off, could you share a little bit about what drew you to dietetics and what you're seeing in your work with both individuals and groups when it comes to nutrition and well-being?
But all nutrition becomes something but the strategy between how everyone your choices, not just something an ideal version of it.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And Angel, I know for myself, when I think back to when I worked in child protection and I would sort of, I guess, make that late afternoon dash to the vending machine for something really sugary because I hadn't really thought about what's going to actually sustain me for that busy work day. I know I struggled with at that time around actually applying knowledge of nutrition to my daily life. Why do you think helping professionals who are the ones who are the first people to give really practical advice to their clients often actually struggle to look after their own nutrition?
I mean, it's always a tricky questions. Um, I think it's not all I just to begin with, it's not always about the lack of knowledge. It is always about prioritization and your capacity. I guess it's always weird for the helping professional to put themselves first. Usually the jobs, whether it's a social worker, allied health professional, any, maybe even GP, their jobs are usually emotional demanding. It is also very unpredictable. Mm, Sometimes we don't have a break. Telling from a dietitian point of view, people love to see us in lunchtime. So that means that we need to sacrifice sometimes our lunch break to helping the other. So after all the combination of capacity or the barrier happen in life, we definitely having something that is a mental fatigue or decision fatigue with a lower bandwidth when our nerve system is stretched, when we are very tired, our default will be something quick, easy, convenient energy. And that's why I'm sure most of you have that sugar craving at 3 p.m. or after work. That is very common. So a big part of what my job is actually helping everyone here to feel less guilt around what about like those 3 p.m. or supper snacking option and build a system that supports the low capacity day.
Yeah, and that was definitely probably, yeah, true in my experience when I'd had a really stressful day in the office. Sometimes what I hear is that a lot of our views around food as adults actually originate from what we saw growing up. Can you talk a little bit about how sometimes our family nutrition, story can actually shape our view as adults and how we view nutrition?
Ah, surprised like because when it comes to nutrition or eating, we always thought that is something come from ourselves, like our decision. And turns out whenever it hits to those 3 p.m. crushes, supper options, we found guilt because we related that to lack of self discipline. But surprisingly, how we eat is shaped longer before we ever learn about nutrition. Think about when you were a kid. What are the unspoken rules in your family? I grew up in my family that we have to finish all of the things before we leave our dining table. Not allowed to have a big snacks. Rice is my only main things. They are the things that actually shape me when I married and then I started to cook my own meal. What are the decisions I'm making? So, but when we think about this kind of like pattern, especially it becomes an automatic pattern in adults now, we actually neglect the fact where we feel about hunger and fullness. And that feeling could be different day to day. It also will affecting how much we eat, whether we deserve to eat when we are busy. Basically, we're copying what our parents did in the past. So, um, really wanted to emphasizing that eating habit is not a personal bruise, but is a learning script. So, um, sometimes, especially for a helping professional, and then we sometimes forgot that like we thought we are the one who make the decision, but then actually with these kind of like background. When it comes to things like, oh, you have to finish all the thing before leave the dining table, there could be a things that you can started to, I don't think criticize, but just started to rethink about whether it is still something that meaningful at this stage for you.
Yes, and you're right, Angel, because I guess we need to think as now that we're all adults making our own food decisions, think about what are some of those views around nutrition that we've inherited from our family and those around us, which maybe they're not serving us anymore. Maybe they were never serving us. So, you raised such an important point about actually thinking about some of these messages and how helpful they are for us and how much they are impacting us today as professionals. Angel, when we met up for coffee, you mentioned this 20% idea. Can you explain why, like, firstly, what you mean by that sort of 20% idea and how this is something that we as helping professionals could look to implement a 20% better concept?
So when we're setting up the goals for ourselves, rather than just looking into the outcome, why not looking into your what behavior that you're having as well? A common example is if I'm gonna aiming for having healthy dinner 7 days a week, if that is your 100% goal, before we're saying, oh, whether it is realistic in long term, I want you to begin with thinking about what are the first 20% that you can do starting right now. When it comes to aiming for 7 days dinner, that's good. Does that mean that the 20% will be maybe just a Monday? That could be your very good dinner day, or 2 days a week, just to begin with. Not perfect, just slightly more supportive. That's the key. And don't forget that to reflect where you are. And then once we can take off this 20% stage, then we can think about what is the next 20% better goal that you can do. Another kind of example for helping professional could be if you're usually getting a takeaway for lunch. It could be a reward that you're going to work or you're working in an office. That's what I do myself, to be honest. I love sushi. And then always ask, can you pair up with a side salad or piece of fruit? Is that the 20% that you can do? Or for those, if you have a tendency to skip a meal, that 20% better goal could be, can you buy a pack of nuts in your next grocery shopping and leave it in your office? They're quite practical. I think about when you build a castle, you always wanted to, put the pebbles around there. And that's how you can build a foundation. So that 20% could be just little pebble until we can build that castle for yourself.
Like thinking about 20% improvement is a much more doable approach rather than, oh, well, I will eat, healthy dinners 7 nights out of the week. And it's similar to people if say regular movement isn't part of their routine, and then they join the gym on Monday and they set themselves a goal to, I will work out every single day this week, when it's about, well, is that actually realistic? It's like, you're right, starting with those baby steps, and then you'll actually have those smaller wins, which would be more motivating to then continue with setting those goals and always look to that 20% better. That's very achievable for busy professionals such as us. So I'm sure that a lot of people will find that really helpful. And going back to what I mentioned earlier around sometimes that 3 p.m. sugar rush that many of us are seeking. And I really think that, vending machines are getting better. I've seen healthier options in vending machines, but also I guess there's the cost that goes with buying meals out all the time and then buying meals from vending machines. They're also not great on the finances. But what are some, I guess, go-to options, some grab and go options from the supermarket for helping professionals that don't need much preparation time?
My personal experience is that I heat up something in a microwave and something caught up with me, and turns out I heat up the meal, but then I haven't got a chance to eat it. And that's it in the microwave for like a couple of hours. And I was like, oh, I need to waste food. What a shame. So, of course, my best go-to for like something quick, easy to snack is actually like a pack of nuts, as I say. At least that could be something that to give you instant chewing kind of movement and also energy. But otherwise, there's more other things that you can consider, depending on what kitchen appliance do you have in your office. If you just have my normal fridge, just a simple Greek yogurt top with a pack of muesli, or adding in nuts. Sometimes we can add in things like chia seed or flax seed. That could be already a very fulfilling snack or light meal option. Otherwise, canned tuna or canned fish, preferably they're soaked in spring water. They're also very good to pair up with, you know, a salad mix, crackers, even those instant rice. They could be things that to pair up with. I mean, they're not perfect. When you hear about that, oh, canned tuna pair with rice, that might not have a lot of fiber. Again, applying that 20% better. Jumping from nothing or going for Uber Eats for something deep fried. Now you're changing it from a deep fry Uber Eat expensive meal to a canned tuna with a salad mix. I think that's a very decent 20% better. Roast chicken sounds the first pops in to my client is like, oh, is that bad to get a roast chicken in the supermarket? Sometimes it's already 20% better approach. So if we can pair up with something, even a bread roll, that will already be a better option than nothing.
That's very practical, the 20% better. Thanks so much. And some people still speak about good and bad foods, and I'm a mum, and I've definitely heard even kids say these foods are good or bad. Why is using language like this not really helpful?
Once we started to have a word, good or bad, attached to a food, we attach morality to eating. And food itself should be a very neutral thing. It's nothing about good or bad. When we say that certain food is bad, even if we're just eating that once, we might feel ashamed by making naughty choices. And that might lead to common things for overeating or emotional eating. So, because they are forbidden. So, like when we think about when we stress, we wanted to get something forbidden and then they're tempting and we eat it. And then moving on, we feel guilt about that. So it is actually, if we want to have a sustainable, positive relationship with food, we don't use the word good or bad. All the food has their own place. It can be a nutritional dense food versus convenience when we have very low capacity versus social enjoyment. So that whole idea is if we're gonna move away from this good or bad label, we can making choices based on what you need at that particular moment.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like there'd be a lot less guilt involved if we dropped those good and bad labels. And Angel, how does nutrition also tie into stress, emotional regulation, and burnout?
Oh, definitely. When we starving or when we have low blood sugar, our stress hormone, the cortisol, will start to increase and our stress tolerance drop. So we are more irritable, we're more emotionally reactive. So that chronic stress can actually blur the hunger cue and drive consistent grazing. So we might forget that we are hungry when we're busy. I'm sure most of you have that experience. And then we might actually craving for sweet things more often because we're low in sugar and then we want to get that instant boost of energy. So the key for the helping professional is it's not your fault and you actually did not fail the goal of eating healthy. Now, if you've started to feel stress and burnout, it might just mean that what your current approach might not applicable at this moment. So you just need a new approach that suit your current lifestyle. Let's say if you're very low emotional battery, and at the stage you are already 60% of your goal. That it is okay to drop that back down to 40% just for this period of time because there's more things that you are prioritizing at that moment, which is your stress and the feeling of burnout. Once that get resolved, then we can consider whether that is the moment to get back to the 60%. So adding a 20% better approach.
We're so used to just caring about everyone else in our roles and in our lives that yeah, we often we don't prioritize ourselves. That's why this conversation is so important. I ask all of my amazing guests, Angel, a question around boundaries. What's one boundary or practice that helps you prioritize your own well-being?
I love this question, Jazmin. It's so good. One thing I do really practice or protect my boundary is always making sure that to block my lunchtime in my calendar. Even if there's a late lunchtime, it's not like 12 to 1 p.m. time. It is just something that's very important to reset, regulate, and show up better for the later day. Especially, I know myself after seeing 3 to 4 people consecutively, I start to get deja vu. I'm like, did I see this before? And that break time is something actually very important so that I could actually start to think about, okay, this is where you're coming from. That's your capacity. Having this strategy might not work well because they just don't have the capacity. So, I mean that is very important to set to block a break time for yourself, and always tell myself. That's what I always tell myself. If you can't do self care practice, how can you convince your client to do the same? So if you have your KPI to your work, you should put a KPI for your own personal well-being as well. Because think about all the monkeys that happen on your shoulder, right? They are all your responsibility. If the client comes to you and say that, hey, I really need some help, eventually they're still their monkey. We are here just making sure that the monkey is not that grumpy. But ultimately, you also have your monkey to deal with. So always put yourself into the top 3 priority if possible.
Thanks so much, Angel. I love the analogy of monkeys. I've never heard that one before, but I love it. I might steal it from you and use it.
Well, I always talk to my partner and be like, okay, is that your monkey or is that my monkey? If that's your monkey, just keep it away from me. Thank you very much. Is that your monkey or is that others' monkey? If that's others' monkey, you don't need to blame yourself or you don't need to ashamed that you're not doing your work properly. But instead, what you need to making sure is you're taking care of yourself so you're not letting your monkey to climb to the other's shoulder.
That's amazing. I love that. And Angel, for anyone listening who wants to know a little bit more about you or work with you or explore receiving some support around their nutrition, how can people connect with you or book an appointment?
You can just reach out to me simply by visiting my website www.weightYourOptions.com.au, or you can follow my Instagram. Recently, I've also got a little freebie for everyone, which is I try to print it out myself. But you can also download the digital version on my website as well, which I think that might helpful because it's just the no stress family meal with 5 mix and match meal dinner idea.
Thanks, Angel. I'm going to get a copy of that little freebie for myself, but I'll put all the links for everyone in the show notes. Thank you so much, Angel, for the pleasure of your company.
Thank you very much. I'm very lovely to see you all, and I can't wait to see how you feel after working with the 20% better approach or the monkey approach. Let us know if that works for you.
Thank you for joining me on Not Another PD. If this episode was helpful and you'd like to find out more, you'll find ways to work with me in the show notes. And if there's a topic you would like covered or someone you think should be on the podcast, I'd love to hear from you. Remember, clear boundaries don't just protect our clients, they protect us too.